The Kentucky Small Business Development Center is a statewide, nationally accredited program that provides no-cost, confidential business coaching and training services. Whether you're just getting started or are ready to expand, we have the tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. We're part of a national network, America's SBDC, with over 1,000 centers across the nation. To learn more about how the Kentucky SBDC can serve you, please visit KentuckySBDC.com or email us at info@KentuckySBDC.com. You can also reach us by calling 888-414-7232. Thank you for joining today's webinar. The chat feature is available for you to ask questions and interact with today's speaker. Please take a moment to introduce yourself and where you are watching from today.
Welcome, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It's time for another Wednesday webinar. Glad you're here today. Thanks for joining me. And if this is your first time, welcome. Good to see you. And if this is your 1000th time, thanks for joining again. As always, if you wouldn't mind, just look to the bottom of your screen there. If you just hover over the bottom, your toolbar will pop up on the Zoom webinar feature, and you'll see the chat feature. Just click on that. And if you wouldn't mind, just to make sure that you can hear me good and you can see everything and everything is good to go, just type in your name and say hello and tell me where you're joining from. We get folks from all over the world sometimes, so I'm always interested in seeing where people are watching from. So if you wouldn't mind, just take a couple seconds and say hello. There's Ashley in Louisville. How are you, Ashley? Good to see you. Let's see who else is popping in here. Ryan's there with us as always. If you look in the chat also, there's a file. You might want to open that up, download that, because we'll be using that as we talk to our guest today. And also, if you have any questions or comments as we go through the presentation today, we'll get to those at the end or during, whenever is appropriate. But this is there's Kathy Pyrek. How are you, Kathy? Just saw you yesterday. Good to see you again. Glad for joining. Happy Wednesday. I've got a great guest today, and he is Bill Reynolds. He is the owner of Element 502 Marketing, and he is one of the best resources we have here in Louisville as far as digital marketing. He's just brilliant. You need to find him just out and about. He's always at Fonte's Coffee on Lexington Road. Stop in any morning, and there he is in the middle table. Check that out. Okay, Ashley, you don't see the file. It's under Ryan Ferguson's post up at the top there. So Ryan Ferguson to everyone. Let's see. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, gosh. Ryan, that might be a problem if they can't see the chat. See what you can do about that.
They can see it if I post it.
Okay, good. All right. There we go. So, yeah. Can you see it now, Ashley? She says no. Does anybody else see the file? Kathy's got it. Okay. All right. Well, Ryan, will you work on that for everybody while we go through this? But so welcome, everybody. So it looks like we have quite a big audience today. So glad you joined us. So Bill, hello. How are you? You look relaxed out there.
I'm on my back deck office here. So one of the fun things about having mobile workforce now is that we get to work other places. I always tell people this really is my backyard. This is not a Zoom background. So, yeah. And I get to sit out here under the deck with the ceiling fans and enjoy some sunshine.
You're very lucky because I'm stuck here in the bowels of the 6th floor at the GLI Nerve Center. So anyway, well, Bill, I'm just going to turn it right over to you because we're going to talk today about the most important thing about marketing is kind of finding out what your special sauce is and telling the world about it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity, David. Thank you, guys. I can start seeing more folks over here in the chat. Appreciate that. Today's session is going to be very interactive. That's why we were trying to make sure that you guys could get a hold of the sheet. Everything that's on the slide on the PowerPoint that I'll be using is on that PDF. And so if you can't get a hold of the PDF, you'll see everything here during the slideshow. And I'll be asking questions. It's going to be pretty interactive here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started with the amazing power of Zoom here. So let me go ahead and get that up here. So now I
Yeah.
get clipped and put down in the corner. So as David said, my name is Bill Reynolds. I'm with Element 502. We're a local marketing and advertising agency here in Louisville, Kentucky. One of the things that comes up a lot is figuring out, well, what do you do? What's your special sauce? And part of that comes from your messaging. I mean, how many times have you heard from somebody where they ask you, like, what do you do? And trying to figure out, like, well, how do I do that? How do I tell them? You know, if you say I'm just a realtor, or I'm just a marketer, or I do roofs, or, you know, if you're not in a very specialty niche, it's kind of hard for someone to really grab a hold to, because they're just like, huh, okay. I mean, if you're somebody super cool that, you know, like is in a hardcore manufacturing of dumpsters and welding and things like that, that's not a very common thing. So that immediately leads to questions. But for a lot of folks, and especially if you're in the Louisville market, as David said, it's not very hard to find somebody that talks about marketing in the Louisville area. There are tons and tons of marketing agencies, and I've lost track of trying to count, because the neat thing is, and especially with economy, there's lots of folks that can put themselves into the same workspace as you. And so how do you differentiate yourself, and how do you start that is what we're going to talk about today. It's about being clear in our messaging and clear in our understanding of what we do. One of the things I always like to start with is some good examples of how to do this differently. So if you guys are ever familiar with our friends down at Culver's, messaging can kind of short circuit if commas, punctuation, and just clear understanding isn't there. I don't know if anybody's ever had double strawberry walleye. I don't really think that sounds like a really good concrete flavor. I mean, I like walleye. I've never had walleye with ice cream or in ice cream, and especially not with strawberries. So that's always a tricky situation depending on the medium. Another great example of that is this sign I found, which I thought was great. People are eating children in this area. Please leash your dog and clean up after them. I'm thinking what this was meant to say is that there's people are eating, there are children in this area, and so please leash your dog and clean up after them, so that way your dog presents aren't left for everybody else. But unclear messaging can really start to erode on what you're trying to do and where you're going in. Now, these are some sign examples, but here's another one. In South Dakota, there's a huge outbreak of meth abuse and other problems that are there. And they brought this up to the governor, and she is great. She is really putting a lot of resources and a lot of effort in behind starting to change that. And so somebody said, well, Governor, what are we going to do about this problem? She said, don't worry, I'm on it. And so that became kind of the catchphrase in South Dakota around meth and meth usage. And so they ran this big advertising campaign, and you can see that when it was a really good idea. And if you're read into the conversation, it kind of makes sense. But when you just see it by itself, seeing bunches of pictures of people that says meth, I'm on it, it doesn't really clearly come out as far as what you're trying to say or what you're trying to do. Now, if you read through, it does say, hey, there's a problem. We're here to work on this and here to do it. I just think that working a little bit on this messaging, working a little bit on making it a little bit clearer could be helpful in trying to get this out. And especially if you don't have context. And that's the big thing. If someone has context about what you're doing or the industry you're in, a lot of times we get caught up in using jargon. We use terminology or things that we know in our own industry. Sometimes that come across in acronyms or in other ways of speak, or maybe it's just a very specific term or terminology in there. It's a lot like going into any area or any circumstance. If you've serviced that area or you're part of it, it's going to make sense to those around you. And you don't necessarily have to worry about it, because if you're talking to other folks that are in there, other peers, then you'll understand that, and it's not going to be an issue. However, if you're talking to people who are outside of your sphere, it's a little bit more important to be able to get that message clearly communicated and put out. And that's what we're talking about today. It happens a lot. We call it the elevator pitch. Well, what do you do? Well, I do marketing. Oh, okay, well, that's cool. I have a friend that does that, or I know somebody that just graduated from college is doing that, and those kind of things. So I have done nothing to differentiate myself or to make myself memorable. In fact, I've done the opposite. I've just thrown myself into a bucket with everybody else. with a lot of trades and a lot of the trades that we work with roofers, plumbers, other things, there's a common terminology that's used in the trade industry, and they call it race to zero. And what race to zero really means inside of the Office of Trades is that if the only thing I can do to differentiate myself from somebody else is to charge slightly lower price, then all I'm really doing is I'm putting myself in a foot race to $0 of profit. And the first person to hit zero, technically, I guess, wins unless somebody's willing to go less than zero, and then you start losing money. And that's not a good place to be. So the messaging can't be, well, I'm cheaper than the next guy. It also is, it's never a good idea in your messaging to throw somebody under the bus. I saw a long time ago in political marketing, there was a person that gave the phrase, he said, mud thrown is ground lost. And that's always stuck with me, because if you're going to say, well, I'm better than this guy, that's not really a differentiator. That's just saying that you're better than that guy. And that's just lining you up for the next person to say, well, I'm just better than them. Because again, you've given your audience nothing to hold on to or nothing that's different. And so there is a formula to go through this. And it's a really neat formula. Like some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, I take from a speaker called Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, and his name is on that sheet. I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I came up with anything that Simon talks about, but if you look it up, Simon Sinek does a TED Talk, and it's one of the top 3 most viewed TED Talks in the history of TED Talks. And to briefly summarize what he talks about is that people don't care about what you do in your business. People really don't care about who you are. They care about why you do what you do. And especially in today's economy, this has become more and more important. With the younger generations or newer generations that are in the workforce, cause marketing and what you're doing as an organization or as a company has become more and more of a compelling story. What I mean by that is that a lot of times when people are looking at where am I going to invest my money by using you for goods, services, or products, they consider it an investment because they're giving you money not only for the product they want, but they want to see what you're doing with that money. So they look for social justice causes. They look for impact in the world, the environment around. What are you doing? What are the values as a culture? What are other things that are out there? Now, this isn't to get on a bandstand about like cancel culture or any of these other hot button topics that are in the news, but it's simply, if I'm going to give you my money or buy things from your company, what does your company stand for? And if I don't agree with it, then I'm going to go look for someplace else to be able to invest in. And that happens from a person as well as from an organization. And so that's why Simon, whenever he goes through this talk, is that people really care about the why you do what you do. Now, what's hard about this is it's really easy for people to go, well, who are you? Well, I'm just Bill. That's who I am. Even worse, it comes into the point of, well, what do you do? Well, I do marketing. And if we focus on the what, it's like I said, it puts you in that bucket. People will forget the what very quickly. They'll just say, oh yeah, he's a marketing guy. And I know 12 or 15 of those. If you've ever been to go to different networking groups, unfortunately, marketers and people who sell life insurance and other insurance, and a lot of times like financial planners, we all get thrown into the same bucket of, oh yeah, I already know 12 people that do what you do. And so I'm not even going to listen to you very much longer. So it has to be more about just the what you do. The who you are, and that can be interesting. You could talk to people about who you are. Maybe you have an interesting story. Maybe you have some background that's unique in a particular area. Maybe you come from a different pedigree, or somebody around you is related to somebody important, or that you've had, just some fun stories. Whenever we start talking about making that introduction and who you are, if you've ever seen me out, one of the things I like to do whenever I introduce a speaker, is I make up a complete nonsense story about them. And the reason I do that is because how many times have you been to a place to where the keynote or somebody is being introduced and the speaker will come up and you already know who they are because you're there. It's all written out in front of you. If you really want to know about where they went to school or where they grew up or those kind of things, or if you go to some of the networking groups, they'll ask additional questions like, what are your pets' names and what's something someone doesn't know about you? But all those things, people start to tune out. And I think if you lose your audience during the introduction, it's really worse statement. And so what I always do is I just make up a complete crazy story about somebody, which again works to set them apart. So like if I was going to introduce David And I'm going to pick on you, David, just because you're one of the hosts here. So if I was going to introduce David Etkin, I would say, I want to introduce you today to our guest speaker, David. David's the head of the SBDC here in Louisville, and he's done a lot of great work. But that's not the only thing that David used to do. David also used to be a professional cook on the Cowboy Trail. He actually ran a chuck wagon. He would draw it with a mule. The mule's name was Tim, and he did this for many years until Tim died. And whenever that happened, David was so torn up by the death of his mule that he had to get out of the business completely. And since then, he's never picked up a cast iron skillet or built a fire to be able to cook anything. And so he looked around and he said, where can I put these skills to use? And he knew he had been dealing with so many different people and so many different problems as he was a chuck wagon cook on the trail, that he would be able to help other business owners be able to start their businesses and be able to connect them to other great resources and people who professionally lie for a living like me. And so I want to introduce you to David Etkin. The bad part about that is sometimes I've been asked, was any of that true? Or people actually believe it to the point where they go and ask the speaker, and the speaker be like, no, everything he said is made up. And I do disclaim it from the beginning, but I think it's just a more engaging way. And the reason that is because the stories are different and it just doesn't sound boilerplate. And so when you introduce yourself, the first thing I can tell you is that never say just. I'm just a marketer. I'm just an attorney. I'm just a mortgage officer. You're not just, or else you wouldn't be there. And that's where this why comes in. And the thing that Simon brings out in his whole why is, what's the motivation factor for you doing what it is you do? So I'm going to take just a second here. If you would, in the chat window over there, I won't call you out by name, and I don't think other people can see it, but just if anybody out there can take just 30 seconds right in the chat window for me, tell me why it is you do what you do in your business. Why did you get into it? And and a lot of times it could be, I just needed money. I needed a paycheck. I need to eat. But if there's a chance to impact those around you or to do something bigger, what is that? So I'm going to give you 20 seconds to type in the chat, and then I'm going to keep talking after that. All right. So I've got a couple of folks in there. Impact other people, help business owners, help those that can't find tax, help people save money on freight and trash hauling, help small businesses. Those are all good things. And where that comes from, and I think if you dig a little bit deeper, is that there's something about your personality or something about you as a business owner, you in particular, that really led you to take that step. You want to help people because of something else. And I think that's a deeper core piece there. And so I would encourage you to watch this Simon Sinek talk, because as he talks through, he works with you to uncover that. And it's a much longer talk, and there's a lot of things that are in there, but that why is really important. You'll see some people who will say, well, here's my why, and they'll show a picture of your family. That's part of the reason why you do what you do, but that's not really that motivating core thing. There's something about you, something unique about the way that you're made, the way that you've been put together, that leads you to that. And your business is the same, because as a business owner, your core values are reflected in your business. The way that you treat your employees, the way that you treat your vendors, the way that other people see you in the business world, the way that other things happen, all of that is reflected in you, in your business. And so that's when, as you start to uncover that, that's this formula that's here. And so on that sheet, and thanks, Ryan, for putting the Dropbox link in there as well. Hopefully you guys can get a hold of it. I'm sure if you reach out to the fine folks at SBDC at the end of this, if you did not get a chance to download it, we'll get you a copy of it. And you don't have to have it to follow along, but I encourage you, if you do, and you have a chance to print it out or to walk it through, I want to talk through these 6 questions. Whenever I get to sit down with somebody and we go through a branding exercise as a marketing agency, or we go through any of these, I always start with these same 6 questions. And these 6 questions really come down to pulling out the key to what you do and why you do. So the first thing is, we work with blank. So let's start there. So who are the customers you work with? What is the audience you work with? I can guess from some of the chats, but let's just start small. So in the chat window for me, type in, who is it that you work with? Who's your target audience? Who is it? It could be small business. It could be something more specific. Like we work with large and small waste haulers. We work with business owners. So give me an understanding of who that is. All right. So we have individual people as well as small businesses, construction companies. We work with women. We work with trash haulers. Oh, awesome. And I got several more flying through here. That's kind of the first thing that's there. Oh, awesome. Awesome. We got quite a plethora of stuff here. So that's the first thing. We work with blank. And so it could be business owners. This doesn't have to be super over the top, but that's kind of the first thing. So when someone says, what do you do? Don't put a label on what you do. Start with this. So I work with business owners who struggle with blank. And this is the second part. This is how we start to unlock what this is. The struggle that happens there is the same thing. Sometimes this comes from maybe your own personal background. I know when my wife and I bought our first house, I kept asking lots of questions about it and saying, how does this work in the home buying process and the mortgage process and all this. And the one thing I heard more than once from more than one person that really started to annoy me was they said, oh, it'll all make sense when you're done. Well, buying a house was a pretty big purchase for us. And we don't have a whole lot of disposable income to just go, okay, well, we'll try better the second time around. It was something I really wanted to try to get right the first time around. It reminded me of someone telling me that, the surgeon, has he done this before? No, but I'm sure the next time he'll really have it down pat. Now, I'd really like him to have it done right the first time. So since I'm the guy that's going to be on the table here. So we wanted the same thing from our home. And so we talked about just how being able to impact people around us with clear understanding of first-time home buyers. What are the things that you need to have in order? What are the things that you need to understand? What are some of the pitfalls to watch out for? And what are some of the things that'll help make this a smoother process? My wife went into real estate for a short period of time and was actually able to bring some of that expertise into some of the customers and homeowners that she worked with. And it was a chance for her to be able to bring that out. And that came from her personal background. And so as far as it comes with struggles, so we figured out, we've got quite a few answers here on people who you're working with on your target there, but what's the struggle you help them with? What is the thing that your business brings to the table? It could be struggle with enough time in the work day. It could be understanding hidden parts of business economy, finances. It could be trying to overcome a supply chain or other issues. So there we go. So tell me some things that you're struggling with, that you help people with their struggle with. I'm seeing some of those things coming in. So who struggle with financials and taxes and dumpsters and roll-offs. I'm looking for a couple more here with financials, with other stuff in there. So looks like we got quite a few people who help in the finance. And, that's one of the things. I have several friends that are outside the box solutions. I'll have to ask more about that here in just a little bit to try to figure out what that means. So I have quite a few friends that work in tax and who are CPAs and also bookkeeping. It was fun because H&R Block ran a commercial a couple of years ago that said all people are tax people. Well, yeah, all people pay taxes, but that's not my specialty. And I sure am glad that we have a CPA that works with us for our corporate taxes as well as individual taxes, because they've not only saved us money by telling us things that we never would have figured out how to do correctly, but they've also saved us from making mistakes. And so that's where that struggle comes in. And so now we've got two of our 6 questions kind of put together here, this idea of who do I work with and what is a struggle? Amen to that. Struggle getting and keeping employees. Yeah, I don't think anybody has solved the magic equation of workforce retention and other things. And I'm just old and crotchety, and so I refuse to overpay or over incentivize. And so I may be to my downfall, but I'm just old and grumpy. So, and next. And would like to this. And so what this does is it starts to paint a picture. I work with these people who struggle with this, but would like to see the world look like this. And that's where that and would like to comes in. So we work with business owners who struggle with getting their messaging out clearly in front of other people and would like to understand how not only to reach their target audience, but in a way and with a message that they can understand clearly. All right, so tell me about this. What are with your business, with the folks that you're targeting? We already figured out, well, here's what their struggle is. What would be the opposite of that? So when you come in, what's the thing that you're bringing? Because you're not saying I do this. And that's the neat thing about going through this formula, is because you're not saying that you can't do this without me. Instead, you're just simply identifying a need. So if you know who you're working with and you know what they struggle with, what are the things that person that's struggling would rather see, that they would rather see as the outcome there? So go ahead and give me some feedback here in the chat. What are some of the changes on that there? Peace of mind. Amen. Tax liability changes. See, that's stuff that I just glaze over, and not because I don't think it's important. I just don't understand it. And I'm glad somebody else is. Ready access and be able to help manage cash flow. That's a good one for any business owner that's out there. Understanding the world around them. Those are some big ones that are there. They want to see how to save money and gas prices to go down. If there's a way to get my gas prices to go down, I would love to see that. Remote is great, but not all jobs can be done remotely. So, but what we do when we say that is that we're making that connection with that why. And now that's back to Simon. So we're not focusing on the what we do, and we're not focusing on who we are. We're Element 502. I'm not giving my company name in any of this. We're simply connecting on the why. How do we connect this? How do we bring this type of information in front of other people? And so that why brings this huge idea of how do we bring ourselves into that conversation to where now we're a partner, or we're a resource, rather than just being seen as a vendor. I don't know if you guys are like me. I always joke that as a business owner, part of my title is other duties as assigned. And what I mean by other duties as assigned is that other things fall down to me when they're needed. There are things that I have to work on, things that we need to prepare for, calls that need to be made, those other things, as well as being out and doing outside sales. If you've never done outside sales, you would be surprised how easy it is to be blown off by somebody, appointments rearranged, those kind of things. And I don't think it's necessarily a mean thing, but when you put yourself into the common area of being a vendor, it's almost like seeing somebody collecting money at a stoplight, where you still people like roll up their window and kind of look off. Suddenly they're very interested in their dashboard or what channel the radio is on, instead of making eye contact. Ooh, all right. So we already got somebody working through these a little bit. I love it. And so by being able to take myself out of a particular bucket, I go into, well, what do we do? And so think about that. Think about if you ask somebody at a networking event, or just you're out at a cocktail party, and you say, well, what is it you do? And if they didn't say, I'm David, I'm with the Small Business Development Corporation here. And then you're either like, I don't know what that means, or, oh gosh, this guy's going to want to sell me something. Sounds like he's going to want me to join something. What if instead you were to say, oh, I work with new business owners, existing business owners, and people who are thinking about opening businesses, and help give them a roadmap to their future, and to help them avoid some pitfalls by using great people and great resources that we have for free and sometimes online, sometimes in person services, as well as paid services as needed, using a network of over 14 different offices around the state. That sounds completely different. And so now I'm partnering. Now I'm with. Let's see. I'm seeing some good stuff here. Oh, we're talking about scaling and growing here. I love it. And so those kind of things, when you start to do that, you start to change. And so those are our first three questions. And those first three things to work through really help start to build up an understanding of who you are, and bring you into that conversation without putting yourself in that spot of, and I'm a vendor, because obviously you are, but it sure does get received a whole lot differently. Now, here's where the thing comes in. And this is what I was talking about with that race to zero or mud throne type setup. What separates this? How does that work? What separates us from other blank? And this is the first time you get to talk about your company. What separates us from other marketing companies? What separates us from other financial planning? What helps separate us from other large large dumpster container manufacturers. What separates us from other financial accountants? So this is the first time. This is the first time you talk about what it is, and this gives somebody a place to hang on to. But the neat thing is that's happened here is that you flip the way that it works around. Oh, you're this great person that's an accountant, instead of like, oh, you're an accountant. And so, because what happens is our brains and in our world around us, we're bombarded with so many different things on a constant basis. Your brain has to go through a lot of different things to be able to find a spot for that to fit. You may have heard this talked about before. They call it some of the fancy marketing terms and just psychological terms. There's one called reticular activation. What reticular activation is where your eyes are suddenly trained to see something that before they would have looked over. And a great example is cars. Of course, before cars were so hard to find, especially used cars or new cars, but it used to be like when you would go out and you're like, oh man, I'm just bought this new red Honda Accord. And then you start driving and you look around and you never realized how many other red Honda Accords were on the road. Well, it's because you've turned on this reticular activation. You're actually looking for it and seeing it. Or if you have someone that's close to you and they just open up a new business, maybe it's lawn care or something like that, then you start noticing all the lawn care trucks and all the other folks that are driving around. All right, Robert, we'll get in a little bit more of yours because I want to see what a little bit more of that is there to be able to help out with that. And we'll work through that as an exercise at the end of this, if that's okay with you, with your permission. And so what separates us from other blank? And this is where we want to make sure that we really hone in on that messaging, because we don't want to say what separates us from other marketing companies is that they are all junk. We don't want to do that. Instead, we want to say something different. And so this is the part where you really have to think through. This is where your why will really start to come through, because this is what separates us from marketing companies is that blank. I always tell people what separates us from other marketing companies is we've been at this for over 7 years. And this is what we do. This isn't a side hustle. This is what I have to look at my kids when I go home and let them know where their money comes from to be able to eat and to be able to have a house. And I also have to be able to lay down on my pillow every night and be able to look at the last thing I think about is to be able to go with a clean conscience that I've done the best job I can with an honesty and integrity for the folks around me, both for my employees and for my customers. I'm not saying that anybody else doesn't do that or everybody else doesn't do that. But one of the things that separates from us is that we actually talk about it and we're very open about it. One of the fun things that we like to use in our office, and if you talk to myself or any of the other salespeople or any of the other employees, is that they'll say something that, well, we like passengers and not hostages. I think that's a very powerful way that we describe it, because I don't know if you're like me. There's been many a time where I felt I've been a hostage in a business relationship. It's either I'm just talked to somebody the other day, locked in a contract, they're not performing. No, there's no joking about that one, about returning your messages. Answering the phone is a big one. We've, these different kinds of things. But if I feel I'm a hostage and I'm locked in a long-term contract and the other company's not performing, that just doesn't make me feel good. As a personal story, we had a contract that renewed on its own. I called to cancel it, and they say, oh, well, you didn't give us cancellation notice, and so you're locked in for another year. And I actually ended up having to run it up the pole pretty far to talk to somebody. And I ended up talking with their chief financial officer. And I told him, I said, I understand your business model, but you got to think about it for me as a business owner. I've been using your product. I've been paying my bills. I see on here that you snuck in this, if I don't give you 30 days, but don't you think that as we were approaching that time for that contract renewal, that my account rep should have called me and talked to me about it and make sure everything was okay? Because at the very least, you missed a chance for an upsell. Or what you've done right now is that I didn't even notice that. I'm already 3 months past that renewal date. Your product's not working for me. I'm not able to sell it. I just asked for a pause, and your response was, well, you can pause at the end of the year of your contract whenever you cancel. That's not good customer service. That's making me feel hostage. I'll tell you what separated that company though, is the resolution was when I talked with the financial officer, he said, that makes total sense. And we're sorry for that. And we're going to make this right. Where a lot of companies go, yep, sorry about your luck. So stand behind what we build, being a returner of messages, years of experience in education, those kinds of things. That's what we bring to the table. Because a lot of times, and especially I know that I've seen some financial folks on here, I've told you, self-deprecating about being in marketing. There's a lot of people who can say that they do a lot of things, and there's not really a whole lot of ways to stand behind it and see if it's true. There's a lot of folks that say, well, yeah, I can do your SEO, or I can build a website, or yeah, sure, I can weld. And I'm joking with my friend there that works in manufacturing. You can say you're a welder, but until you lay down a bead, it becomes pretty quickly if you know what you're doing or not. But I also know she's a great enough lady that she's going to make sure that if you just honestly say, I don't know how to do that, she'll say, well, I can show you how. And we got some great people. That honesty goes a long way. Experience and education are always good that are out there, but I think you need to be a little bit more specific on that. One of the things that I talk about whenever I'm talking about, especially to small businesses, is that I'd say, tell people I'm a small business owner too. So when we're negotiating for costing or payment schedule, or if things take a bad patch and we need to make a change, I always empathize. Hey, I'm a small business owner too. And so here's what we can do. Never lose sight of the fact of where you sit within your company, and the life experiences that you bring is a very valuable part of that. So don't be robotic in the delivery of this. And for goodness sake, do not throw arrows and darts at the people around you. Don't say, well, we're better than those people. Some of the other things that come out, one of the things that separates us from other marketing companies is that we're a small boutique agency that invests your marketing dollars back into giving you the best possible product, rather than having big fancy offices or other lavish lifestyle choices. We're a pretty simple bunch that just do a good job for a fair price for our customers. Again, I'm not naming names or poking fingers. And if that's not something, and the other neat thing about that is if that's not something that your audience resonates with, it gives them a chance to automatically start to exit and to select out, because there's nothing worse than trying to pursue somebody that's really not going to go anywhere. If your introduction is from the purpose of trying to turn a prospect into a possible lead. And now we come because of this. This is your final way to be able, this is our sixth question here. Because of this, we tell the person what is going to happen from them. So we work with small and medium-sized businesses who struggle with getting their message out in front of the right person at the right time in the right medium. What separates us from other marketing agencies is this is our sole passion, and our sole focus is to work for you to be able to get this out. And because of this, you get a trusted partner that gets your message out, sets it in a place to where you can have peace of mind, and you own everything that you do, so that if we ever need to make changes in the future, you know that your marketing and your company and your image are still maintained and intact, regardless of what the future holds. That's what this because of this does, is that you help fill in the blank for them. You're not being it from a mean standpoint or from questioning somebody's ability or their intelligence. You're simply just going ahead and connecting the dots. Because again, we're talking about this as an elevator pitch. And if you've listened, we do all of this in less than 40 seconds. So in that 40 seconds, if you follow these questions, we work with blanks who struggle with blanks and like to blank. What separates us from other blanks is that this blank, and because of this blank, what happens there in that 40 seconds, you've already identified the problem that you come to do, why you're the best choice for it, what motivates you to do that, what that person that you're talking to can expect. And then on the end, what's going to be the end result? And if they have somebody they've ever heard of that does the same kind of thing as you do, they already get to say, well, here's my pros and cons, my old, Ben Franklin T chart of, well, what are the goods and the bads here? And so I can stack you up against somebody else. By doing this and by having this kind of clear messaging and clear marketing, it really starts to set the stage that you're not like everybody else, and you're not in a race to zero. And as you start to put that together, that's your recipe. That's the recipe for your own personal special sauce. And this could be for your business. This could be in something else. We work with nonprofits. This is a great way for nonprofits to be able to quickly say about who they are, who are the people that they impact, and how are they different than some of the other agencies and other things that are around there. So I encourage you, take some time, think through that. What is that? Now, I did get one here, and if you don't mind, tell me a little bit more about it. If you can use the chat there. You talked about separates us from other Senate office, federal office, congressional offices. If that's okay, if you don't mind giving me just a little bit more info to work with on that, I'd really like to hear what that means a little bit. So if you would use the chat, or if anybody else, if you can think of your because of this, what is that closing thing that you have? Share some of those and let's workshop those here together. Gotcha. So you work for a senator. So, and I won't mention her name unless you put it back in the chat that it's okay for me to say. And so if you're working with well, it is hard to compare off. So the person I'm talking with on chat, just to give you guys a whole context here, he had written in, how do I separate myself from other senators, from other things, from other places here, working in the field office. And he actually works for one of our state senators, Senator Rand Paul. And so he was talking about, well, how do you separate yourself from other folks and other pieces that are out there without criticizing others? And see, if you read through those 6 questions again, that's kind of the cool jujitsu about the way this is, because you can say that you're different and you can point out flaws in others, but you just don't have to call them by name. So we work with our constituents and with the folks who are in our area who struggle with fair representation of their voice, the belief that anything can change in the world around them through government, and just overall dissatisfaction or satisfaction with the things around them, and would like to see things done differently and like to hear a clear message. What separates us from other folks in this political arena is that we return calls, we listen, and we actually have a track record that shows this. And because of this, you can trust what we say. And when we bring up things that's truth and integrity, but also our track record, our voting record are able to be seen, and that you know that we are fighting for you. And I never had to mention anybody else's name that's out there. You're welcome. I'm glad it's helpful. Does anybody else want to work through any of that? Because I'm happy to workshop with you and we can do this live. I know that it's easy, but this is what we do every day, is work with this, because I listen to people and talk to people and try to put it into this type of framework, because I think it's super empowering when you start to put that in. So if anybody else wants to work through theirs, tell me in the chat and we can do that. I've seen a couple of folks in here who work in the financial area and those kind of things. And so you don't want to just be put into, hey, I'm just another accountant or I'm just another CPA. Think about some of those unique things that you understand, or maybe it's early in somebody's business. And so you're trying to show them that it is a cost that's there, but it's worth doing the outsource. That comes up a lot. So with being able to have information on here's what I do, here's how it's there. The whole business owner, the old joke of, $100 an hour. And I say joke because I think somebody who wasn't a business owner must have wrote it. They said, well, if you wouldn't pay yourself $100 an hour, wouldn't pay someone else to do this for $100 an hour, why are you doing it yourself? That makes sense as long as I have that money to be able to outsource it. And sometimes I don't. If I do have the ability to be able to use somebody else's expertise and I don't have to put in my own sweat equity, then that's great. And I'd love to be able to rely on those people. So put yourself in that same situation of understanding, here's who I am, here's what I do, and here's how this works together for you. And so as we recap here, and I'm sorry, I got to click and it's going to go tink, 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 tink. Your why. So we work with blanks who struggle with blanks and would like to blank. What separates us from whatever it is I do, is that blank. And because of this, blank. All right. So Jeremy, tell me a little bit more about what it is that you do, because you're not a widget builder. So tell me just give me a quick high level of what this is, and then maybe we can build a framework to work off of here. So tell me is what you do. If you're not a widget builder, what if I was to say, what do you do? And you give me just the boilerplate answer. What's the field that you're in? Whoa. Gotcha. All right. So I get what you do. I have an understanding about it. And I'm going to butcher this because we haven't sat down and talked about this. But here's an example. So we work with business owners who struggle with understanding the trajectory and the operational business plan of their overall organization, and would like to know that they can have a plan for the future that leads to a financial outcome for them that's profitable, as well as the continuation of the businesses. What separates us from other business planners and coaches is that I work in this every day, and that we do not use a boilerplate or cookie cutter transaction here. Instead, we work directly with the business owner to figure out what that passion is. And because of this, we're able to work with you to set up a plan for your future that solidifies your legacy and your pocketbook. That's a whole lot better. Oh, thanks for the compliment. Appreciate that. Again, I do this a lot. So I get the joy of being able to work with tons and tons of business owners, and I recognize some of your names on here. So thanks a lot for joining in on this. So work through this. Again, my name is Bill Reynolds. I'm with Element 502. We're a marketing and advertising agency here in town. If you want to shoot me an email, my email is Bill, BILL at element502.com. Our company name, Element 502, comes from the fact that we're in the 502. This is where we all live. I love living in Louisville. I love this area. I've lived here for a very, very long time. I wasn't born and raised or went to high school here, but I moved up right after to go to college and have never left. And we call it Element because the way that we look at our team is that we're all individual elements, just like a periodic chart. And so whenever you put together elements in the periodic chart, you're either going to have something that looks really cool and works really great, or explodes, or just is a big old mess. And so our job is to be able to take this expertise and the things that we have, be able to put them together in a new and exciting way for you, using the best things that you and your company have to offer, and be able to deliver something that's truly exciting. So thanks a lot for your lunch hour to be able to come in, jump in on this. And so I'm Bill. David, you still there?
I'm
There he
right
is.
here, Bill. It's good to see you.
Awesome.
That was
So,
really,
I know
really, that was great, Bill.
What?
That was
Oh, you're
really
welcome.
great.
Thanks. And thanks for letting me use you as my my introduction with your chuck wagon days. I'm sorry about Tim the Mule not working out for you there.
Yeah.
That was on that. So
Uh,
if anybody has any questions, what do they do next, or about this or other exciting opportunities in the future for SBDC?
Yep, just throw it in the chat there and we'll talk about it. Glad to see that you called out Kathy, my friend Kathy. She has the coolest business startup story in the world. I don't know if she'd let me share that with everybody, but it's one of my favorites. So, oh, she said sure.
There you go.
So I'm sure I'll butcher it a little bit. So I might tell it the way I like to hear it. But her and her husband were walking behind their house in the alley and picked up a piece of trash or some poop and put it in a dumpster. And they said, I wonder where these dumpsters come from. And so they did some research. Now they manufacture dumpsters because there evidently was kind of a shortfall of dumpsters and stuff. So it's a cool company. They're great people. And my favorite story ever.
And one of the other cool things is I'll brag on Kathy. She said I can confirm the story because I know Kathy as well. One of the cool things that Kathy does is that, and where I was talking about being able to be a welder and lay down a bead, that's what they do. And so they're not just a pole barn in the back of somebody's yard. They actually have a full-on production facility with paint booths and everything that's in there. But one of the neat things that Kathy does, and I know I saw some people on here with workforce development and retention, she'll find folks that may not be a master welder or even really know that much about construction. But I'll tell you, if you show up and you're willing to learn and you're willing to put in the work, because building dumpsters, surprise, you're building new dumpsters so they're not full of trash, but it's still working and sweaty. I don't think the air conditioner works out in the warehouse very well on days like today as they're working, and you're working with metal and electricity. She says, no, it doesn't work very well today. But if you're willing to put in the work and the effort, you're going to be able to learn a skill that is super, super in high demand, being a welder, and being able to learn from other people. Because the other thing is that there's no room for shortcuts or halfway doing stuff. And something as important as a dumpster, because when you load it up you put it under full weight load, and a truck comes and picks it up, and somebody just spot welded here and there because they didn't feel like doing a full job or be able to really test that weld, and the bottom falls out of it, you got problems everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you ever get a chance to talk with Kathy over at River City, Fall City. I said River City. My apologies. At Fall City, man, it's amazing the stuff that they do there. So
Yeah, it is really, really cool. So, so I've just put in,
oh, thanks.
oops, I screwed that up. I'm putting in Bill's email address here because you guys get a chance, reach out to Bill. He is a great resource. And I got to do that again because I messed that up. Sorry about all this. Here we go. Okay, there's here we go. Oops, that's element502.com. I screwed that up again. Oh my gosh.
Sorry, we'll get it there during the practice of this, just to kind of, I was practicing this with David and doing my screen sharing and other things. And I do this a lot, but I love hitting the wrong button. So I actually hit leave the thing and just jumped out of the entire presentation the first time. So,
Yeah.
and then David had to let me back in. So there we go. Look at that.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So, yeah, reach out to Bill. He's a great resource. That's like I said, and it's helped out tons of people, and one of the best people I know, and a great
thanks.
frequenter of Fonte's Coffee on Lexington Road. So check that out.
Yeah. If you want to talk more about how to find that formula for your special sauce, I know there's a cup of coffee always helps out sitting across and kind of breaking down that barrier. And that's really my whole goal with this. I think if we can tell people about what really motivates us, I think it makes business a whole lot more fun than I do marketing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, glad to help out. And thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Thank you, Bill. And thanks everybody for joining us today. And if you would just quickly click on the bottom there, there's a link also for our survey. Give us some feedback. And if you have any future topics you'd like me to explore, please put those in there. I'm always happy to hear from everybody and enjoy the help and hearing from you. So, Bill, thank you. This has been spectacular. One of the best ones ever.
Thanks. Appreciate that. So, it's always fun to be able to hit here. And again, David gave you guys my email. Reach out. I'll be happy. We can chat and talk about it, because if we can make the world better one business at a time, man, we're going to have a lot more fun as the world continues to go. So.
Exactly. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you guys very soon. In fact, we'll see you next Wednesday. So happy Wednesday. Have a good week.
All right. See you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining today's webinar. At the Kentucky SBDC, we know small businesses are the heart of our economy. That's why our goal is to help business owners start, grow, and succeed in Kentucky. Find out more about how our no-cost business coaching, training, and resources can help your business. Visit us at KentuckySBDC.com.